Alrighty guys, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be doing a Supreme Commander Science video. I'm putting it in this playlist even though it is a little bit more of a tutorial video because there are a lot of hard numbers that are involved, as well as some pretty sterile testing to test how these numbers are actually impacted. Before we get into that, I wanted to thank everybody so much. The last Supreme Commander Science video, looking at my screen right now, has about 200 views, so it seems like you guys really seem to like this kind of content. If you guys have any suggestions or requests on this kind of content, I love putting this stuff together. I like numbers, so go ahead and send them my way. Drop them in the comment section below. Getting into it, so today's video, I don't think the results here are going to surprise anybody on this video. We're going to be testing why you shouldn't use labs as main battle units. The reason why I'm making this video is whenever I end up getting matched against new players on the ladder, and I've also had some newer players send me replays to comment on and help them get better. Incidentally, if you guys want to send me replays and have me either do a review on them, make a video, anything like that, please feel free to send them my way. I'm more than happy to take a look at them and give you some pointers as much as I can, being kind of a middle of the road mid-rated player. But getting into this, whenever I get matched against a newer player, and we'll say 300-400 rating on the ladder or below, more often than not I see players using labs as battle units at tier 1 as their main battle units instead of just as rating. So this can be really tempting, and I think for a lot of newer players, because whenever you look at a lab, it looks cheaper than main battle tanks. They're also created faster, and they are much quicker on the field and actually moving. So it can definitely be tempting. But we're going to go ahead and look at some hard numbers as far as how many labs you actually need to defeat the main battle units of each tier. So we're going to be testing flares, mech marines, as well as hunters, and stacking them up against Thams, Mantis, Aurora, and strikers. Roughly a lab is about 35 mass and 120 energy across the tiers, and the main battle unit ranges a little bit in cost. So Mantis are, I think, 52 mass, and strikers on the more expensive side are 56 mass a pop. So range from about 63% to 67% of the total mass cost of the main battle units at tier 1, and 50%ish of the energy costs. So there's going to be a very large asterisk here. We are going to be comparing these across the tiers. The big asterisk is in front of the Aurora, so you guys should be well familiar that Auroras have longer range than their counterparts in the other factions, but that comes at a sacrifice of HP. So since there is only one of me, and I can't both create units and micro the Aurora, and have micro over the labs as well, I did have to just do the test with the Aurora standing still in range of the labs. So that's not going to be 100% representative of how the Aurora is going to behave, but I think that you guys can use your creativity on the Aurora side. So we did 3 primary tests. One test was 2 labs versus main battle units from each faction. The reason I picked 2 is because this is going to be the closest. In comparison in terms of resources that you'll expend. So 56 mass for a striker, and 70 mass roughly for 2 labs. So this is where we started off. The only test where the labs survived in this one was the Aurora test. So versus Mantis, strikers, and Thams, the medium or the light battle units at T1 were able to destroy all of the labs. I don't think that this comes as a surprise to anybody, but the key here is, though, that this was the closest we could get in terms of resource expenditure, but 2 labs are still roughly 35 to 37% more expensive than a single main battle unit in a different tier. So you're spending 35 to 37% more resources and not getting the same amount of damage or HP. One of the main battle units will still win against 2. So that leads us to kind of test 2, which is, okay, so if 2 doesn't do it, and that's the closest that we can get in terms of resource expenditure, how many labs do we actually need to defeat 1 main battle unit? So in order to test this, I bumped it up to 3 labs. So we're at roughly So we're at 3 labs here, roughly at 200% of the mass cost. So 105 mass cost for 3 labs, and 52 to 56 mass cost for the main battle units. And this one we did actually have the labs end up winning. So I think that they won in every single scenario. I'm just going to check my test results here real quick, but I think they won in every single scenario except for the striker versus 3 flares, in which all of them died. But in all of the other scenarios, 2 of the labs survived. 1 was very heavily damaged whenever you compared it against the main battle unit. So the key thing to keep in mind, though, is that you are spending 200% roughly of the mass for 3 labs that you do for the main battle unit, and the only thing that you're really getting is a little bit of a speed bump. So jumping to our last test, which is more large combat oriented, we did 10 strikers, which strikers fared the best of any of the T1 battle units, versus 30 mech marines, and 30 mech marines fared the best of any of the main battle or any of the labs. So doing this, we did throw a little bit of micro in here, like you would normally if you were actually fighting within a battle on the mech marines. We had 8 labs survive. So if we cut it down to 25 mech marines, then 3 labs survive, and I think that that's kind of the sweet spot. So in large combat with some maneuvering, it does make the footing a little bit more even. The biggest challenge in this test, and if anybody wants to help me out on these tests, that would be awesome, because I can only micro one side. And so the big problem here is that whenever the AI is controlling a unit or a group of units, the AI will focus down each individual unit. So I found that in most scenarios, all 10 strikers were focusing down 1 lab, and it only takes 3 shots or 4 shots, I think, to kill a lab. So not the most efficient usage of the rounds in those situations. So if somebody wants to help me out and help me out on these tests, I would be super down. Which leads us to our kind of conclusion, and I don't think anybody is surprised on the findings of these tests. I was surprised at the cost. That was the big surprise for me. So if we were actually going to get to a point where labs can compete with the main battle units from each individual faction, we're having to spend roughly 200% of the mass, which blew my mind. And this is not saying that light assault bots are bad in any way, shape, or form. They do have their uses. They're just not a great head-to-head main fighting unit. They're good either for raiding early on in the game, or if you need to snipe engineers from a drop. There have been times whenever engineers will get dropped on a plateau, and the best way to respond is just crank out 2 or 3 light assault bots instead of spending more money on either Mantis or something like that, because they get created faster. They are much faster and more maneuverable with a speed of 4, and I'm not really sure what Forged Alliance Forever, their database, what 4 means in their database from a unit side, but we can compare that to 2.9 on the Aurora side, and then 3.7 on the Mantis side. So they are a little bit faster. So they are being a little bit faster does help them out a little bit, but I don't think that it's enough to justify a 200% cost expenditure. The biggest surprise for me as well was the large test, where 25 mech marines were able to beat 10 tanks. I didn't think that ratio was going to be quite as low as it was. I thought that it was going to take more like 30, maybe even more, to deal with it. So that test surprised me a little bit as well. And I'll wrap the video there, guys. Like I said, I don't think anybody was super surprised by the results of this test. The reason why I did this video is twofold. Number one, I want newer players to be able to kind of understand when it is appropriate to use different individual units. The second reason I did this was I wanted to put numbers behind this, and I was curious about how this looked. So I did the testing, and you guys get to actually just benefit, because it doesn't take me a whole lot of time to put together a video after this, after we get done with the testing. Last thing I want to close with is, if you are a newer player, or even if you're a better player and you just want another set of eyes on any of your replays, go ahead and send them my way. I'm more than happy to take a look at them, and I'll make a video on them if you want, critiquing them. I'm not a professional or anything like that, but I do know a couple of things on this game, and I'm not a terrible player, I'd like to think. But yeah, we will wrap the video there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.